Hello everyone. This is a game I originally made over a year ago, but I just kind of never got around to making a video about it, so here we are. This all began many years ago, back when I was playing online Flash games as a kid, and I particularly enjoyed one game called Small Worlds. In it you controlled this tiny 4-pixel tall stick figure thing, and when you moved around you got rid of darkness tiles around you, and I really liked the aesthetic of the game where each pixel was a separate tile, and I've always kind of wanted to recreate that, and this is where I finally got around to doing it for the Nokia Game Jam, the 5th one I believe. So here I'm just figuring out how to make this tile set and creating the player movement. And I figured that this concept would be great for a very minimalist Metroidvania, firstly just because of the incredibly minimalist graphics, obviously, but also because clearing out the tiles, as you will see in a bit, creates a very kind of organic way of making a game map, because as you explore the area, you naturally uncover more areas for your map. Here you can see even the most skilled programmer has to resort to YouTube tutorials at some point. And here I'm playing around with the hitbox of the player, because this is actually a common misconception that the hitbox is the same size as you would expect from the player. Usually it's a really different scale and size, because usually a lot of things in video games are actually biased towards the player. And for example here I'm making the hitbox much smaller than the actual player sprite to make getting into small holes much easier. You can see this problem come up in a lot of amateur games where it's hard to get, for example, into 1 block wide gaps. And here you can see I'm figuring out finally the main mechanic of this game, which is like clearing out this darkness as you move around. In this version I made it pretty much hard-coded when tiles are being erased. In the new version I made it so that a circle is constantly being drawn around the player, so it feels much more fluid, I guess. And here I'm adding an overlay to set all of the colors to the Nokia colors. I later actually end up, I think, removing this and just making everything be drawn at these colors. Usually I do this palette trick because I like to be able to change palettes, but here I guess I ran into some problems with that. And here I'm trying to design the gameplay for the very first section. I want to more or less teach the player how to move and jump around, I guess. And here I want to create a 3-block tall jump so that the player is forced to grab a power-up, the first one of many. And maybe at this point I should mention how this Metroidvania is structured. To make it as minimalist as possible, I decided I will not have any fancy abilities. I will have jump power-ups, movement speed power-ups, air jumps or double jumps. I will have a flashlight power-up to create a larger area of light around the player. And finally a wall jump power-up that will just unlock wall jumping. Apart from that, there are buttons which can either open doors or they can open the secret ending. Well, I say that, but there's actually no secret ending in this version yet, it's just like a kind of collectible. And here I'm programming the buttons and make sure they light up with the same symbol on both the door and under both the door and the button. And I'm again tweaking the player's hitbox. Actually, if you look at the current hitbox, like in the current version of the game, it looks way off. It's just like that famous Geometry Dash spike hitbox. But it works. And because, as I mentioned, this gameplay style lends itself really well to an organic map system, I really wanted to add that feature. And the map in this version is just a very simple free cam, basically, that allows you to, for a moment, move around your camera without moving around the player. I decided very early on that since I'll have literally one tile to work with for the world design, I better get the most out of it, so in this case I used Morse code to spell out home as you walk into this giant tree section. Later you'll see more examples of this kind of organic level design, and this is something I'm actually really happy with. I'm really happy I took on this project, because it forces me to think in a new way about world design. For example, I have to try to make each area feel unique without like any other changes apart from the level design itself. So in this case, this underground area is a very tight maze, as you'll see in a second. But first a double jump power-up has to be added. And this is the tree, that's kind of the central hub area. Here I'm trying to use Godot's bitmap font feature, but I think I'm having trouble figuring it out, so I just recreate the font in FontStruct. Actually, I lied, I just stole it from someone else, apparently. And I'm just using the font to make a basic pause menu. And here I'm finally fleshing out that map feature. So as I mentioned, the only things I actually have to save in the save game are which collectibles have been collected and which buttons have been pressed, and the position of the player. There's no health to keep track of, there's no other power-ups, there's no XP or enemies. And to be honest, I'm actually kind of used to making games like this. I tend to focus on one key aspect and just grind away at the content around that aspect. Oh yeah, and one thing I also have to obviously keep track of is what tiles have been uncovered. One of the main skills of a good programmer is efficient Googling, as you can see in this example. And here I finally figured out a bug in the font rendering. And now begins the UI grind. Luckily it's not that big in this game, but sometimes this is seriously, feels like it just never ends. And I believe this was in a version of Godot before the linear to dB function, or maybe I just forgot it exists, and I had to manually write that function for the volume control. Because this is made for the Nokia Jam, there was only one sound that was allowed to be played at once, so I had to make sure I designed this system thoughtfully. So I just literally have one audio source that can play many different sound effects, and the sound effect gets stopped every time a new sound effect is played. And here I'm just quickly using a MuseScore to create some simple melodies, some simple jingles for collecting power-ups and so on. Also, one thing I decided pretty early on is that I'll have a different jingle for each type of power-up, which I think is a cool detail. And one thing I also added in the post-mortem version, which by the way, I'm still working on it, more or less actively. But one thing I did there is I also changed the way the particles move around those different power-ups, depending on what type of power-up it is. And then I'm just using this library of Nokia sounds that someone else compiled, Tricks compiled, to get all the other sound effects I need. You can see that I tend to multitask, and I was writing a presentation for English at the same time, treatment of cystic fibrosis. And now finally the long playtesting sessions begin. What kind of surprises me looking back is that this is barely over halfway done with the project, and it already kind of feels finished, but apparently it's really not. Here you can see I'm having trouble with creating a new save game, so I decided to hack things by just introducing a value at the end of the save file, and if it's set to 1, then I just ignore the entire save file. That's how I go around just deleting the save files. In my newer games I do a slightly different trick where I just have a version number, a save file version number at the beginning, and then whenever I update the way I save data, I just introduce new functions into the load game function to make sure I accommodate for that. And here I'm writing in color RGB values by hand. First dividing by 255 on a calculator and then typing them into a shader because I cannot get these values somehow any other way. And this is just the simplest way for me. Here I'm again playing around with logarithms to get that decibel level. And for some reason I'm having trouble with this, but I get it working in the end, I think. Here, my maths lessons really came to use, as I applied the change of base rule for logarithms. And here you could catch brief glimpses of my MP3 library, which has since grown quite substantially. I'm really happy to be out of the Spotify trap now. Everything is offline here. And well, looks like it's finally time to finish up this world design. I've been putting it off because, as you may or may not know, I kinda hate level design, but it has to be done at some point. And honestly, my hate for level design is probably mostly because of how much experimentation is required. Like, for example, for this area, I figured out after some time that I wanted flat floors and more or less even dome shapes. And for this maze area, it's kind of a weird thing, but I hate kind of forcing myself to just create something. But it feels really satisfying watching it in a time-lapse, so I'm really glad I recorded this. I also introduced a lot of dead ends, apart from the hallways being barely big enough to accommodate the player character, to make it feel especially claustrophobic. Also, this blue thing you can see around this area is a trigger that actually makes your cone of light smaller, so that's another detail I made to improve the atmosphere. And here you can finally start to see the world take shape. And here I'm finally creating the actual ending of the game, where you just jump off the right cliff. And I create this little lighthouse-esque tower to keep track of the secret buttons, of which there are 8, I think. I don't remember actually. And you can see there for a moment I was creating these floating islands at the surface, but then I actually just decided it looks better without them. And this is one of those parts of level design that no one really realizes is so important, this experimentation and prototyping. And here I finally create the logo for the game, and I decided to kind of carve it out of darkness at the beginning of the game, so that later when you come up to the surface you see this logo just kind of giant looming over your head. I was really proud of that idea, actually. And if you have enough double jumps, you can carve into the logo as well. Yeah, here I still need to make the game actually start once you press any button, and here I'm just carving out this logo. So the game doesn't start out completely dark, it just has this specific pattern of light carved into it. Here I finally add some screen shake, which cannot be much because I'm limited to an 84x48 resolution. So I can really make at most 1 pixel of budging, but it does make quite a difference actually. And I believe this is when I finally give up with the shader, because I just cannot get it to scale properly, I think. I tried to rescue it with a visual shader, but even that is not working. The sprite is for some reason disappearing. I even tried out a different version of Godot, but it has the same problem. I wrestled with these shaders for quite a while. I tried to make some kind of pixel shader, but it is at this point that I finally decide to just get rid of it and render everything by default in the Nokia colors. And this could have saved me a lot of pain, but alas. And here's one of my final playtesting sessions, where I go through the game. And let me tell you, it is so fun to draw in this darkness with the area of light. It was a very good idea to get inspired by small worlds. I believe after this point I gave a couple of people a playtest. You can see here I also changed the hitbox of the player to a triangle shape. And this is the finished product.